The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than Earth's moon and filled with lights that sparkled like diamonds. Ships from 100 different worlds docked at its ports. Today was special. Today was the day when all the smart races of the galaxy would show off their best machines. Tom Williams walked through the long metal halls of the station. His old boots made quiet sounds on the smooth floor. He carried a small case in his hands. Inside that case were Earth's hopes. Tom was not young anymore. His hair was gray and his face had lines from years of flying dangerous test flights back on Earth. He had seen rockets blow up. He had crashed planes. But he never gave up. Around him, aliens of all shapes and sizes moved with confidence. Some looked like giant cats with purple fur. Others were tall and thin like walking trees. Some had too many arms. Some had no arms at all. But they all had one thing the same. They all thought they were better than humans. The main hall was huge. It could hold 1 million people. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the top. In the center was a stage where each race would show their best technology. Tom found his seat in a corner. It was not a good seat. The aliens had given humans the worst spot because they thought humans were not important. The show began. First came the Altarians. They looked like blue dolphins that could walk. Their leader, Admiral Finn, pressed a button. A hologram appeared showing their fastest spaceships. These ships could jump between stars in just minutes. The crowd made sounds of wonder. Our quantum-fold fighters, Admiral Finn said in a voice that sounded like singing, can travel faster than light itself. We can cross the galaxy in days. Everyone clapped. Tom watched and nodded. It was good technology. Very good. Next came the Centauri. They were plant people with green skin and leaves for hair. Their ships were not made of metal. They were grown like trees. Dr. Root stepped forward with pride. Our bioships are alive, she said. Her voice sounded like wind through grass. They heal when damaged. They learn and grow stronger. They never need fuel because they eat space, dust and starlight. The crowd was impressed. Some aliens stood up to clap. Tom wrote notes in his small book. These living ships were amazing. Then came the Vegans. They were the oldest race in the galaxy. They looked like walking crystals that caught light and threw rainbows. Lord Prism moved to the stage like he owned it. Behold, he said in a voice like breaking glass, our planet breaker weapons. The hologram showed a weapon that could crack worlds in half. We have kept peace in the galaxy for 10,000 years with these. The hall went quiet with fear and respect. Even Tom felt scared. These weapons could destroy Earth with one shot. Race after race showed their technology. The spider people had ships that could turn invisible. The rockmen had armor that nothing could break. The gas clouds had computers that could think faster than any brain. Finally, it was Earth's turn. Tom stood up slowly. His knees hurt. He walked to the stage while hundreds of alien eyes watched him. He could hear some aliens whispering and laughing, quietly. Tom opened his case. Inside were some data chips and a small projector. He set it up with shaking hands, not because he was scared, but because he was old and tired. I am Tom Williams, he said into the microphone. His voice was rough but strong. I speak for Earth and the human race. He pressed a button. The hologram showed human rockets. They were big and loud and used fire to push themselves into space. The aliens looked confused. This was old technology. Very old. These are our chemical rockets, Tom said. They burn fuel and make fire. They are loud and sometimes they blow up. Some aliens started to giggle. Tom ignored them and showed the next image. This is our fusion drive prototype, he said. The hologram showed a strange engine with pipes and wires everywhere. It looked like it was held together with tape. We built it last year. It barely works. Sometimes it catches fire. Now, more aliens were laughing. Tom could hear them making jokes in their strange languages. Is this a joke? Called out someone from the crowd. It was Council Leader Vex. He ruled the hegemony, the most powerful empire in the galaxy. He looked like a walking diamond with many sharp edges. Humans, you have been in space for less than 100 years. We have been traveling between stars since before your son was born. The laughter got louder. Tom stood quiet and waited. Your prototype, Vex continued, uses technology that we perfected 10,000 years ago. What could you possibly teach us? What could you show us that we do not already know better? Just then, a news alert flashed on the screens around the hall. It showed a human airplane on Earth. Smoke was coming from one engine. People were running away as it made an emergency landing. The aliens saw this and laughed even harder. Look, shouted someone. They cannot even fly safely on their own planet. Their planes catch fire with people inside. How can they build spaceships if they cannot build airplanes? Tom watched the news report. Yes, it was embarrassing, but he knew something the aliens did not know. He knew that the pilot had saved everyone on that plane. He knew that human pilots trained for emergencies like this. He knew that humans learned from every mistake. The laughter was so loud now that Tom could barely hear himself think. Aliens pointed at him and shook their heads. Some were taking pictures to show their friends back home. The great human space program was a joke to them. Council leader Vex stood up. His crystal body caught the light and threw sparkles across the room. Humans, he said in a voice that cut through the noise. Perhaps you should go home and learn to build better airplanes before you try to build starships. The whole hall erupted in laughter and applause. Tom felt his face get hot with shame. But he did not run away. He did not shout back. Instead, he closed his case quietly and picked it up. As he walked toward the exit, Tom stopped and turned back to face the crowd. The laughter slowly died down as aliens wondered what he would say. Tom looked at all the proud faces. He looked at their perfect technology and their confident smiles. Then he spoke in a quiet voice that somehow everyone could hear. Sometimes, he said, the oldest ideas work best when you need them most. Then he walked out of the hall, leaving behind a galaxy that thought humans were fools. They had no idea that in just a few months those same humans would save them all. But that is a story for another day. The aliens went back to their parties and celebrations. They forgot about the old human and his broken machines. They forgot about the plane that caught fire and the rockets that sometimes exploded. They would remember soon enough. 6 months had passed since the great humiliation at Nexus Prime. Tom Williams was back on Earth, working in a small office in Colorado. He spent his days writing reports that nobody read. The other human diplomats avoided him. They blamed him for making Earth look foolish in front of the galaxy. But Tom did not care about their blame. He was busy studying something else, something that made his blood run cold. The first reports came from the edge of the galaxy. A trading post called Haven's Rest had gone silent. This happened sometimes. Pirates attacked traders, or equipment broke down. The Galactic Council sent a patrol ship to check. The patrol ship never came back. Then 3 more outposts went dark. Then a whole mining colony. The aliens were starting to worry, but they were not scared yet. The galaxy was big. Sometimes things got lost. Everything changed when the Altarian battle fleet disappeared. Admiral Finn had taken 50 of his best quantum-fold fighters to investigate the Silent Zone. These were the ships that could jump between stars in minutes. They were fast, smart, and deadly. Finn sent regular reports as his fleet moved deeper into the darkness. Then nothing. The last message was just screaming, and the sound of metal tearing apart. Council Leader Vex called an emergency meeting. Representatives from every major world gathered on Nexus Prime again. But this time, nobody was laughing. The great hall that had been full of jokes 6 months ago was now quiet with fear. Something is destroying our ships, Vex announced. His crystal body was glowing brighter than usual, which meant he was afraid. We have lost contact with 17 systems in the past month. Dr. Root from the Centauri stood up. Her leaf hair was turning brown with worry. My bioships went to help the Altarians. They sent one message before they died. They said the attackers were wrong, not natural, not alive, but not machines either. Lord Prism spoke next. The ancient Vagan's crystal form was flickering like a broken light. We sent our planet-breaker weapons, enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. The weapons fired once, then went silent forever. Fear spread through the hall like a disease. If the Vegans' ultimate weapons could not stop these attackers, what could? The answer came from an unlikely source. A small scout ship from the Rockmen had escaped the latest attack. The pilot, Captain Stone, was badly injured but alive. He stood before the council with bandages covering half his face. "I saw them," he said in a voice like grinding rocks. "They are not like anything we know. They are geometric shapes, perfect and impossible. They do not fly. They just appear where they want to be. And they eat energy." The hall went silent. "My ship's shields were drained in seconds," Stone continued. "My weapon stopped working when I fired them. Every bit of power I had was sucked away. The only reason I survived is because my emergency systems shut down everything. I drifted, like a dead rock until they lost interest." Vex stood up slowly. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Stone replied, "that these things consume any form of energy we use. Fusion power, plasma weapons, quantum engines. They eat it all, and every time they feed, they get stronger." A Centauri scientist named Dr. Leaf raised one of her branch arms. "That is impossible. There are laws of physics. Energy cannot just disappear." "Tell that to the 17 systems that went dark," Stone shot back. The debate that followed was loud and desperate. Some aliens wanted to attack, with everything they had. Others wanted to run to the far edges of the galaxy. A few suggested surrendering, though nobody knew how to surrender to something that could not be talked to. While the council argued, the attacks continued. The hegemony's home fleet vanished overnight. The Spider People's invisible ships were found floating dead in space, their crews missing. The gas cloud's supercomputers went silent mid-calculation. Each victory made the attackers stronger. Intelligence reports described them as massive geometric shapes that pulsed with stolen energy. They called themselves nothing. They said nothing. They just consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. Captain Jake Morrison read these reports from his small office on Luna Base. Jake commanded Earth's tiny defense fleet. 12 old ships that most aliens would consider scrap metal. He was Tom Williams' nephew, and he had inherited his uncle's stubborn nature. Jake looked at the tactical data with tired eyes. He had been awake for 3 days straight, trying to understand the enemy. The pattern was always the same. Advanced. Ships would engage the attackers. The attackers would drain their power and leave them floating helplessly. Then the attackers would move on, leaving behind dead husks of what used to be the galaxy's finest technology. But Jake noticed something the aliens had missed. He pulled up the casualty reports and cross-referenced them with ship designs. The quantum fold fighters died first because they used the most energy. The bioships lasted longer because they used life force instead of artificial power, but they died too. The planet-breaker weapons were drained instantly because they channeled massive amounts of energy. There was a pattern here. The attackers, someone had started calling them Devourers, could only consume energy-based technology. They could not drain what was not there to begin with. Jake's communication system beeped. An encrypted message was coming in from Nexus Prime. The sender was Tom Williams. "Jake," his uncle's voice sounded old and tired. "The situation is worse than the reports say. The Devourers are not just random attackers, they are systematic. They are consuming the galaxy piece by piece, system by system. The Council estimates we have maybe 3 months before they reach the core worlds." Jake leaned forward. "What about Earth? Are we on their list?" Tom's laugh was bitter. "We are so far down their priority list that we might as well not exist. They go after the biggest prizes first. The most advanced technology, the most energy-rich targets. Earth is like a small snack they will save for last." "That gives us time," Jake said. "Time for what?" "Jake, you did not see what I saw on the tactical displays. These things have consumed entire fleets. They have weapons that can crack planets. What can Earth possibly do against something like that?" Jake stared at the data files on his screen. Ships that used fusion power, dead. Ships that used quantum engines, dead. Ships that used plasma weapons, dead. But there, buried in the casualty reports, was something interesting. "Uncle Tom," Jake said slowly. What about ships that do not use advanced power systems? What do you mean? I mean old technology, really old technology, chemical rockets, mechanical systems, things that work without fancy energy sources. There was silence on the other end of the communication. Then Tom's voice came back, thoughtful and careful. Jake, that is crazy. Chemical rockets against planet killers? It would be suicide. Maybe, Jake replied. But it might also be the only thing they cannot consume. As if to prove his point, another report flashed across his screen. The Centauri homeworld had gone dark. 3 billion plant people gone in a single night. Their living ships had tried to defend them. The ship's bioenergy had been drained so fast that they died screaming. Jake made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Uncle Tom, I need you to stay alive for 3 more months. Can you do that? Why? Because, Jake said, powering up his communication system to contact Earth's hidden military bases. Someone needs to be there to see what happens when the galaxy's biggest joke becomes its last hope. The line went dead. Jake sat in his chair and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were consuming another civilization. But here, in the Sol system, humanity was about to do something typically human. They were about to prove that sometimes the worst technology is the best technology. Jake Morrison stood in the biggest secret room on Earth. It was hidden deep under the mountains of Colorado, where his Uncle Tom used to work. Now it buzzed with activity like a beehive. Hundreds of humans worked day and night, building something the galaxy had never seen before. The room was filled with the sound of hammers hitting metal. Sparks flew from welding torches. People shouted instructions over the noise. It smelled like oil and hot metal and human sweat. To Jake, it was the most beautiful smell in the universe. Dr. Lisa Park walked up to him, wiping grease from her hands with a dirty cloth. Lisa was Earth's smartest engineer, but she looked like a mechanic. Her hair was tied back with a rubber band and her clothes had holes burned by sparks. Jake, come see what we have built, she said with excitement in her voice. They walked through the huge underground factory. Workers were putting together spaceships, but these ships looked nothing like the sleek alien vessels. They were thick and ugly, with pipes sticking out everywhere. They had rust spots and patches welded over holes. They looked like they might fall apart if someone sneezed too hard. Beautiful, are they not? Lisa said with pride. Jake laughed. Lisa, they look like garbage trucks with rocket engines. Exactly, Lisa grinned. That is the whole point. She led him to the biggest ship in the factory. It was 3 times larger than any human ship ever built, but it looked like it had been assembled by children playing with scrap metal. The name painted on its side read, ESS Prometheus. This is our flagship, Lisa explained. She has 7 fusion drives, but none of them work properly. The radiation shielding has gaps in it. The hull is held together with welds that will probably crack under stress. And the engine room gets so hot that we had to install air conditioning just to keep the crew alive. Jake stared at the ship. Lisa, this thing will kill everyone who flies in it. Maybe, Lisa agreed cheerfully. But it will definitely confuse the hell out of the Devourers. She took him inside the ship. The corridors were narrow and cramped. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping condensation. The walls were covered with warning signs in red letters. Danger, high radiation, do not touch, explosion hazard. In the engine room, Jake saw the fusion drives that the aliens had laughed at 6 months ago. But these were different. Instead of 1 clean, efficient reactor, there were 7 messy ones. They leaked radiation, made horrible noises, and seemed to be held together with duct tape and prayer. The drives do not work the same way twice, Lisa explained. Sometimes they produce too much power. Sometimes not enough. Sometimes they shut down for no reason. Sometimes they try to explode. We have no idea what they will do from moment to moment. That sounds terrible, Jake said. It is, Lisa agreed. But think about it from the Devourer's perspective. They consume clean, predictable energy. They adapt to whatever power source they encounter. But what happens when they try to drain a reactor that is already trying to explode? Jake began to understand. They cannot adapt to chaos. Exactly. The Devourers expect organized energy patterns. They are perfect machines built to counter perfect technology. But our technology is not perfect. It is barely functional. It breaks down in new and interesting ways every day. Lisa showed him the E1 weapons systems. Instead of plasma cannons or laser beams, the human ships carried chemical explosives, metal bullets, and kinetic impactors. Old-fashioned bombs that worked by blowing up, not by channeling energy. We have gone back to the basics, Lisa said. Gunpowder, TNT. Things that work by chemical reaction, not energy manipulation. The Devourers cannot drain an explosion that has already happened. In another part of the factory, workers were building smaller ships. These fighters looked even worse than the big ships. They had mechanical controls instead of computer systems. Their engines ran on burning chemicals. Their weapons were basically flying cannons that shot metal slugs. Captain Mike Davis was testing one of the fighters. He climbed out of the cockpit, his face pale and his hands shaking. "How did it fly?" Jake asked. "Like a brick with anger management issues," Mike replied. "The engine nearly exploded 3 times. The controls stick. The navigation system is a magnetic compass and a prayer. And the landing gear only works on Tuesdays. But it flies. Oh, it flies. It just flies like it is personally offended by the laws of physics." Meanwhile, reports from the galaxy grew worse every day. The hegemony's capital had fallen. The Centauri homeworld was a dead rock. The ancient vegans had retreated to their deepest bunkers, but even they were running out of places to hide. The Devourers were not just winning. They were growing stronger with each victory. Intelligence reports described them as massive geometric forms that pulsed with stolen energy. They had consumed the power of entire civilizations and used it to build bigger, more terrible versions of themselves. Jake received a desperate message from his Uncle Tom on Nexus Prime. The transmission was weak and full of static. "Jake, they are coming. The Devourers have consumed everything between here and the galactic core. We estimate 3 days before they reach this station. The survivors are loading onto evacuation ships, but there is nowhere left to run." Tom's voice cracked with exhaustion. "Whatever crazy plan you are working on, now would be a good time to try it." Jake looked around the factory. Human workers were loading weapons onto the ships. The fusion drives were being tested, creating small controlled explosions that shook the whole mountain. Everything was chaos, noise, and barely controlled disaster. "Lisa," Jake called out, "how many ships do we have ready?" 12 big ones, 40 fighters, and about 100 smaller vessels," she replied. "None of them work properly, and half of them will probably break down before we reach the battle." "What about crew?" "We have volunteers from every human military, pilots who were kicked out of other services for being too reckless, engineers who build things that should not work, but do anyway, Marines who think explosions are a form of art." Jake smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in months. In other words, the perfect crew for impossible ships. "Pretty much," Lisa agreed. Jake walked to the communication center and opened a channel to all the ships in the fleet. His voice echoed through the factory and reached every human who had volunteered for this insane mission. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, 6 months ago, the galaxy laughed at our technology. They said our ships were primitive. They said our fusion drives were failures. They said we should go home and learn to build better airplanes. The factory went quiet except for the distant sound of fusion drives being tested. "Well," Jake continued, "today we are going to show them what our failures can do. We are going to take our broken ships and our impossible weapons, and we are going to save a galaxy that thinks we are idiots." A cheer went up from the workers. It was not a pretty cheer. It was rough and loud and full of human stubbornness. "Load the ships," Jake ordered. "We launch in 6 hours. Time to show the universe what happens when the galaxy's biggest joke decides to stop being funny." The ESS Prometheus began powering up its 7 mismatched fusion drives. The sound was terrible, like 7 different songs being played at once, all in the wrong key. Radiation warnings flashed red. Steam vented from damaged pipes. It was the most beautiful sound Jake had ever heard. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Nexus Prime, and immediately everything went wrong. The ESS Prometheus shuddered like a dying animal. 2 of her 7 fusion drives shut down without warning. The third one started making a sound, like a screaming kettle. Red lights flashed all over the bridge as radiation leaked from the damaged shielding. "Status report," Jake Morrison shouted over the alarms. "Engines 4 and 6 are offline," reported Chief Engineer Bob Miller. His voice was calm despite the chaos. "Engine 3 is overheating. Engine 7 just caught fire, but that seems to be normal. Oh, and the coffee machine exploded. Can we still fight? Sir, this ship was designed to fall apart. The fact that we made it here at all is a miracle." Jake looked out the main window and saw why his uncle had sounded so desperate. Nexus Prime was under attack by 3 Devourer vessels, and they were like nothing the humans had ever seen. Each Devourer was a perfect geometric shape, triangles and cubes and spheres that somehow fit together in ways that hurt to look at. They were massive, each one bigger than a city. They pulsed with stolen energy, glowing with the power they had drained from 100 conquered worlds. Around the station, the remains of the Galactic fleet were fighting a losing battle. Altarian ships fired their quantum weapons once, then went dark as their power was consumed. Centauri bioships writhed in agony as their life force was sucked away. Even the mighty Vegan planet breakers had become floating hulks, their weapons silenced forever. "Sir," called Communications Officer Mary Chen, "we are receiving a transmission from all the alien ships. They are telling us to run away." "What are they saying exactly?" Jake asked. Mary listened to her headset. Quote, "Primitive humans, your technology is too weak to help. Flee while you still can. Do not waste your lives on a hopeless battle." End quote. Jake smiled grimly. "Open a channel to all human ships." The communication system crackled to life. Jake could hear the voices of his captains, pilots who had been kicked out of other services for being too reckless, engineers who built impossible machines, Marines who thought explosions were poetry. "This is Captain Morrison," Jake announced. "As you can see, we have arrived at the party just in time. The aliens think we should run away because our ships are too primitive. I think it is time we showed them what primitive can do." "Sir," interrupted Weapons Officer Dave Thompson, "the Devourers are turning toward us. I think they want to drain our ships next." "Perfect," Jake replied. "All ships, execute Operation Broken Arrow. Remember, do not try to make your ships work properly. Let them break down in interesting ways." The Prometheus charged toward the nearest Devourer, her remaining engines screaming like banshees. Radiation poured from her damaged hull, creating a signature brighter than a small star. Her fusion drives operated on 5 different power levels simultaneously, creating an energy pattern that changed every second. The Devourer reached out with tendrils of pure energy, trying to drain the approaching human ship. The tendrils touched the Prometheus and immediately recoiled. The Devourer's adaptation systems had been designed to counter every known form of energy in the galaxy. They could drain fusion reactors, quantum engines, plasma weapons, even bioenergy from living ships, but they had never encountered a fusion drive that was trying to explode while simultaneously running out of fuel and overheating. "Sir," Bob called from the engine room, "the Devourers are trying to drain engine number 1, but it keeps changing what kind of energy it produces. I think we are confusing them." "Good," Jake replied. "Confuse them harder." Bob grinned and started pressing random buttons on his control panel. Engine number 2 began producing gamma radiation. Engine number 5 started leaking plasma. Engine number 7 exploded, then somehow kept running anyway. The Prometheus slammed into the Devourer's hull with the grace of a falling piano. Human. Marines poured through the breach, carrying chemical explosives and mechanical weapons that worked by purely physical processes. Sergeant Bill Rodriguez led the boarding party into the alien ship. The inside was like walking through a crystal cathedral designed by a computer that had gone insane. Everything was perfect geometric patterns that shifted and changed as they watched. "Okay, boys," Bill said to his squad. "Remember the plan. When in doubt, blow something up." The Devourer's internal defenses activated, beams of energy that could disintegrate anything they touched. But the human Marines were wearing armor that worked on the principle of being too stupid to die. The armor was thick metal plates held together with bolts and welding. When the energy beams hit it, the armor got hot, but it did not disappear. Ha, laughed Marine Tom Baker, as an energy beam bounced off his chest plate. Your fancy space magic is no match for good old-fashioned steel. Meanwhile, the rest of the human fleet was engaging the other two Devourers using tactics that no military academy in the galaxy would have approved. Captain Sarah Jones flew her fighter directly into a Devourer's energy beam, let her engines catch fire, then used the explosion to launch herself at the alien ship's weak point. Her ship was destroyed, but not before she dropped a payload of chemical explosives that blew a hole in the Devourer's hull. Captain Mark Wilson's ship lost all power, so he used the emergency thrusters, which ran on compressed air, to ram his vessel into a Devourer's energy collector. The collision broke both ships, but the Devourer's collector was damaged beyond repair. The battle became a symphony of controlled disasters. Human ships fell apart according to human design, creating chaos that the Devourers could not predict or counter. Every time the aliens tried to drain a human fusion drive, the drive would change its energy output or simply explode. Back on the Prometheus, Dr. Lisa Park had reached the first Devourer's control center. It was a room filled with quantum computers that processed information faster than any brain could imagine. The computers were trying to analyze the human ships, but they kept getting error messages. "Let me help you with that," Lisa said cheerfully. She pulled out a small device from her toolkit, a mechanical music box that played an old Earth song called "Mary Had a Little Lamb." She attached it to the main computer core with duct tape. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Devourers, quantum computers, had been designed to process any form of energy or information in the universe. They could understand the thoughts of living beings, the quantum fluctuations of empty space, even the mathematical patterns that held reality together. But they could not understand why someone would attach a children's toy to a computer that could calculate the position of every atom in a galaxy. The simple, repetitive mechanical pattern of the music box created a feedback loop in the Devourer's processing systems. The computers tried to analyze the pattern, failed, tried again, failed again, and began consuming their own processing power in an endless cycle of confusion. "Sir," Bob called from the engine room, "the Devourer is starting to drain itself. Its energy levels are dropping fast." Jake watched through the window as the massive alien ship began to dim. Its perfect geometric patterns started to flicker and distort. The entity that had consumed the power of entire civilizations was being destroyed by a music box that cost $3 and played nursery rhymes. "All ships," Jake announced, "target the other Devourer's computer cores. Remember, when in doubt, attach something mechanical and stupid to their smartest systems." The tide of battle turned. Across the galaxy, the Devourer network began receiving error signals from their forward units. The perfect machine intelligence that had adapted to every possible threat found itself unable to process the concept of weaponized incompetence. Human ships continued to explode, malfunction, and fall apart. But they did so according to human design, creating patterns of chaos that the Devourers could not counter or absorb. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers encountered something they could not consume: deliberate failure combined with stubborn human refusal to admit defeat. The first Devourer went completely dark. The second one began spinning wildly as its navigation systems tried to process contradictory data from a broken compass that somehow pointed in 17 directions at once. The third one simply gave up and started flying away from the battle, as fast as its confused engines could carry it. Jake opened a communication channel to the surviving alien ships. "This is the human fleet. Nexus Prime is secure. The Devourers are retreating. The galaxy is saved by ships that should not work and weapons that barely function." There was a long silence on the communication channel. Then, one by one, the alien voices began to respond. "How?" asked an Altarian captain. "Impossible," whispered a Centauri scientist. "The humans. They broke the Devourers by being broken themselves," said a Vegan observer with something that might have been respect. Jake smiled as he watched the last Devourer disappear into the darkness between stars. "Sometimes," he announced to the galaxy, "the best way to win is to be too stupid to lose." 3 days after the Battle of Nexus Prime, Jake Morrison stood in the same great hall where his uncle had been humiliated 6 months earlier. But everything was different now. The hall was packed with representatives from every surviving world in the galaxy. They sat in respectful silence, their eyes fixed on the small group of humans at the center of the room. Gone were the laughs and jokes. Gone were the smug smiles and superior attitudes. The aliens looked at the humans the way people look at magicians who have just made a mountain disappear. Tom Williams walked slowly to the speaker's platform. His nephew had insisted that Tom should be the one to address the council. After all, Tom had stood here 6 months ago and taken their mockery with dignity. Now it was time for him to speak as the representative of the species that had saved them all. Tom's old boots made the same quiet sounds on the smooth floor. But this time, the aliens listened to every step. They studied his weathered face and gray hair with something like reverence. This was the man who had warned them that old ideas sometimes worked best. Council Leader Vex rose from his crystal throne. His sharp edges caught the light, but instead of reflecting arrogance, they now showed humility. "Ambassador Williams," he said in a voice like chiming bells, "the Galactic Council owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." Tom nodded, but did not smile. "The debt is already paid, Council Leader. You gave us the motivation to prove ourselves." "By laughing at you?" Vex asked, confused. "By underestimating us," Tom replied. "Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift you can give someone." Reports had been flooding in from across the galaxy for 3 days. The Devourer network was collapsing everywhere. Their perfect intelligence had been infected by what human engineers called the music box virus, a cascade of logical errors that spread through their quantum communication systems. Dr. Lisa Park stood up to explain the technical details to the assembled scientists. Her grease-stained work clothes looked out of place among the elegant alien robes, but nobody was laughing at human fashion choices anymore. "The Devourers were designed to be perfect," she said. "They could adapt to any energy source, counter any weapon, predict any strategy. But perfection has a weakness. It cannot understand imperfection." She activated a hologram showing the quantum feedback loop that had destroyed the Devourer fleet. "When we attached mechanical devices to their computers, we introduced chaos into their perfect systems. Their intelligence tried to process random data and logical contradictions. The result was a cascade failure that spread through their entire network." Dr. Root from the Centauri raised a branch-like arm. "But how did you know this would work?" Lisa grinned. "We did not know. We were just too stubborn to give up and too crazy to do things the normal way." Admiral Finn of the Altarians spoke next. His blue skin had lost its proud glow. "Our quantum fold fighters were the fastest ships in the galaxy. The Devourers drained them in seconds." "Your ships were perfect," Jake Morrison replied from his seat in the front row. "Perfect is predictable. Predictable is easy to counter." "And your ships?" asked Lord Prism of the Vegans. Jake laughed. "Our ships barely worked. Half of them broke down before the battle even started. The other half caught fire during combat. But they broke down in ways the Devourers had never seen before." Captain Mike Davis, still bandaged from the battle, stood up. "My fighter lost power, lost weapons, and lost navigation. So I used it as a guided missile powered by compressed air and pure stubbornness. The Devourers spent so much time trying to figure out how a dead ship was still attacking them that they forgot to defend themselves. The aliens murmured among themselves in dozens of languages. They were trying to understand how failure could become victory, how weakness could become strength." Tom walked to the center of the hall and looked up at the assembled representatives. "You asked me 6 months ago what humanity could offer that you had not already perfected. I told you that sometimes the oldest ideas work best when you need them most." He paused and looked around the room. "The oldest idea in the universe is not giving up, even when everyone tells you that you are wrong, especially when everyone tells you that you are wrong." Council Leader Vex descended from his throne and approached Tom. The crystal being moved slowly, carefully, as if he was approaching something sacred. "Ambassador Williams, the Council has made a decision. We formally invite humanity to join the Galactic Federation as a full member." The hall erupted in cheers and applause. Representatives from 100 worlds stood and clapped for the species. They had mocked half a year ago, but Tom raised his hand for silence. "We accept your invitation," he said, "but with conditions." The cheering stopped. The aliens looked nervous. What could the humans possibly want? "First," Tom announced, "human ships will patrol the galaxy's borders. Our broken, chaotic, impossible ships will be the first line of defense against any threat that thinks it can adapt to everything." Vex nodded eagerly. "Agreed. What else?" "Second, we want to establish human engineering schools on every major world. We will teach your young people how to build things that should not work but do anyway." The alien scientists looked excited at this prospect. They had spent the last 3 days studying human technology, trying to understand how chaos could be turned into a weapon. "And third," Tom continued, "we want you to remember this lesson. Advanced does not always mean better. Perfect does not always mean strongest. Sometimes the best solution is the one that everyone says is impossible." Tom looked directly at Council Leader Vex. "6 months ago, you asked what we could possibly teach you. Now you know. We can teach you how to fail successfully." The hall was silent for a moment. Then Vex began to laugh. It was not mocking laughter this time, but the sound of genuine joy and relief. Other aliens joined in, and soon the entire hall was filled with the sound of a galaxy celebrating its salvation. 1 year later, human patrol ships could be found throughout the galaxy. They were still ugly, still prone to breaking down, and still held together with duct tape and determination. But they were also the most feared ships in known space because any enemy that tried to fight them quickly discovered that humans had turned malfunction into an art form. The ESS Prometheus became a legend. Tourists from across the galaxy came to see the ship that had saved them all. They marveled at her patched hull, her mismatched engines, and her proud display of the mechanical music box that had brought down an empire. Tom Williams retired to a small house on Earth, where he spent his days writing memoirs that nobody believed until they checked the historical records. He kept one souvenir from his time as an ambassador, a small piece of crystal that Council Leader Vex had given him as a token of respect. Jake Morrison became Admiral Morrison, commander of the Human Defense Fleet. His ships still caught fire, regularly, still broke down at inconvenient moments, and still somehow managed to win every battle they fought. Dr. Lisa Park opened the first human engineering academy on Centauri Prime. Her students learned to build machines that worked by defying logic, physics, and common sense. The graduation ceremony involved deliberately breaking their final projects and then fixing them with whatever materials they could find. And in the deepest parts of space, the few surviving Devourers fled toward the edge of the universe. They had learned a hard lesson about the dangers of perfection. They had encountered something their vast intelligence could not process, a species that found strength in its weaknesses and victory in its defeats. The galaxy was safe, protected by ships that should not fly and weapons that barely worked. The humans had proven that sometimes the biggest joke becomes the greatest hope. And whenever young aliens asked their elders about the Great Devourer War, they were told the same story. Never underestimate someone who refuses to admit that their EO plan is impossible, especially if they are human. The end.